we take all of the stress into money. And that's why I've known so many women in the corporate field and even in the entrepreneurship field where they made so much money. It had nothing to do with how much they made, but they never really knew what to do with it because they were so busy making it. Their health was suffering. Their nervous system was an absolute mess as well. Their whole hormonal structure was a mess. And, it creates a catastrophe, and that speaks for so many women.
Hey yogis, Mackenzie Fly here, mom, yogapreneur, teacher trainer, retreat leader, and your guide to master your yoga teaching. This podcast is your weekly dose of actionable wisdom and candid chats with industry experts. Learn to connect deeper, weave yogic magic, and lead by example. Full disclosure, I'm still mastering it too, but together we'll skyrocket your impact and income. Hit subscribe and let's grow, one episode at a time. Guided through embodiment and teachings of Yoga Nidra for the past 6 years, Gihan Saiid adopts a feminine approach to her role as a studio owner, where she prioritizes rest and embodiment. Gihan's teaching style incorporates breath awareness, adopting a body-centered approach, blending the asana, yoga postures, into her class experiences, known for her distinct winding down approach in her classes. Gihan aspires to work with women, guiding them into their bodies and helping them navigate burnout. The retreat theme was inspired from a deep rest course she took with Nicola Jane Hobbs on the role of the different forms of rest and navigating different stressors. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm so excited that you're here, Gihan.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here today.
Yeah, she is actually one of the first people that has reached out since the launch of the podcast, filling out the form to say, "Hey, I want to be on this podcast," which I think is pretty cool that as a newer podcast, we're only about 30 episodes in, to have other people finding it and then wanting to add their voice to it is really exciting for me as a host. So I am really, really excited to give you the platform to share some of your wisdom and your genius with the listeners. Can you start by just telling us a little bit about you, where you're located, and how yoga kind of found you?
I'm so grateful to be here, first of all. I think I'm from Egypt, so Egypt is my home country. I was born and raised in Egypt. Actually, I'm half Syrian, half Egyptian, so my mom's from Syria, my dad's from Egypt, but we've lived our whole entire life in Egypt. And I came across yoga almost 6 years ago or 7 years ago. And the way that I was introduced to the practice was absolutely through a pure vinyasa and asana practice. And I used to go there super stressed out, super burnt out. And at the time, I didn't know that this was burnout. And I would wait for Shavasana to completely just melt down. And I knew that something magical was happening there. And then after 2 to 3 years into the practice, I went into my first training, and it was 200 hours traditional vinyasa training in Koh Phangan in Thailand. It was a beautiful island, actually. And then when I came back, I acquired the studio that I was teaching in because it was, the crazy pandemic time, and it was a very hard time on the industry across the whole world. And in Egypt specifically, the industry has so much growth to still witness. So I acquired the studio in my hometown, and I've been running it for 3 years now. And my methodology has changed so much since I started. I was pure asana. I did so many trainings on asana and yogic movement and all those amazing practices. And after 3 years or 4 years into teaching, I felt guided by the teachings of Yoga Nidra, understanding the nervous system. I did my training with Jana Romer, and ever since then, that was 2 years ago, my entire way of running my life changed completely.
That's so beautiful. For the yoga teachers who do not teach Yoga Nidra, Can you give a short description of the practice, or for the teachers who are interested in adding it to their toolkit, where can they start to research or learn more about it too?
So, Yoga Nidra is an ancient yogic practice, and the methodology is backed by a lot of modern science practitioners. The whole practice is an invitation into your body. What usually happens is that the body falls asleep while the mind remains awake and aware. So, what usually happens is that we travel through different brain waves in our body that allows us to connect to our bodies on a deeper level. So in a normal yoga nidra session, the practitioner is usually guided into their subconscious. So the whole idea is to get into the 99.999%, as my mentor and guide Jana Romer would refer, that is part of us, more energy and space rather than material, and to connect into that part that we cannot see, speak to it, and learn how to rest. The second thing around if other yoga teachers want to include it in their toolkit, I believe the only way to include a tool in your toolkit is to just first absolutely dive into it, practice it so many times and melt into it completely, get obsessed with it, and then go into, like, I have, like, my teachers are Jana Romer, Tanis Fishman. I know a lot of other beautiful teachers who have impacted the industry. There's also Trey Stanley, the author of Radiant Rest. Her book is amazing, and that's another resource that people can pull up. And then there are also a different part that has nothing to do with yoga, and they're backed by so much of modern science, like the teachings of Joe Dispenza, and this is also a huge influence on my practice as well. And his books are absolutely phenomenal. They all speak the language of the practice of yoga nidra, actually, but he steps away completely from the spiritual aspects of yoga, and he backs it all by modern science, which is also absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Well, thank you for kind of pointing people in some direction if they want to learn more. When you mentioned that you were experiencing burnout, but at the time you didn't realize that it was burnout, can you talk a little bit about what those signals were that the body were giving you, so that maybe some teachers who are currently kind of meeting that place of burnout you can help them maybe identify it? And then would you say that the yoga nidra kind of medicated the burnout and helped you come out of that? Or what was your journey out of burnout?
So I believe I'm still going through a burnout. I think burnout is a process, especially if you're likely to have an addiction to stress, which is, a huge high percentage right now of women are going through. Then you're more likely to be going through different ranges of burnout. My experience with burnout, actually, it began a long, long time ago. I think it's the way that the women in my family were brought up. So the women in my lineage, they come from a place of work, 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 work. And it has nothing to do with how much money they're making or how well they're supported. It's just how we are wired. So this is how I grew up witnessing, like, you have to work hard and you cannot rest, and you just need to really, grind your way into life. And then I am like the third generation in my family of women. So when you look into the life we're living today, it's absolutely normal to say, I'm stressed out. Like, it's so common, so you assume that it's normal even though it's not. So my burnout began when I was really young. It didn't start when I started working or when I got into college or when I stepped into the capitalist structure of the career oriented life, because I've also been working in a corporate structure for 8 years. I mean, I've left now, but this is where I came from. So it started long before that. It's my relationship to work. And I think this is very common with women, is that it's become so messed up now that people say, oh, stress is bad for you. You should step away from stress. Specifically in the yogic industry, it's very common for people to assume that they need to separate from their lives completely in order for them to get medicated, like we were just saying, like to feel like they have a connection to their bodies. I mean, people don't speak this language, like in my corporate world and in my friends and community from the corporate place, they assumed that if I'm meditating every day, if I'm doing yoga nidra, which of course is very hard for them to understand as well, then it means I'm separated. They would send me, all those videos around words they don't understand, and they would assume like, oh, abundance, manifestation, that's for you, right? And it's like, but I do so much more than just this. I mean, I love this. I believe in thriving and abundance, and I do believe in manifestation, of course. But being regulated has nothing to do with something you cannot see. Like, it's super scientific as well. So for me, through the Yoga Nidra practice, I understood that, oh, I am a person who's wired for burnout. I didn't know until I dove into the practice. The first invitation was that I started to experience my body in a place where I'm not overthinking. I'm actually in the state of Yoga Nidra where your mind is just somewhere else, even though your body falls asleep, you're really connected to a different source. You're receiving, whatever, you're receiving downloads, or you're letting go. Like, at the time when I started, it was burnout, it was my language. So what I was doing is that I was resting. And I believe I wasn't just resting for me, I was resting for all the women who came before me. So this is how I was introduced in the beginning. And then as I went into the practice, my relationship started to change from just understanding that this is burnout to understanding my nervous system as well. I started to see the patterns of my nervous system. And then I started to see a huge correlation between women, stress, their nervous system, and their relationship to work. You cannot unsee it anymore. Because again, stress is not bad for you. The word burnout is a result from the relationship that we are cultivating with stress. So stress is amazing. Like, before I do this podcast, I was a little bit excited, and my system registers excitement with a little bit of stress. So I wanted to stay up late, document all the notes that I would love to talk about. I wish people would hear, learn from. But I'm happy with this, because after we finish this, I'm gonna spend equal amount of time coming back to my body, resting back, and taking this in. It's not bad stress. It's just how we relate to stress.
Yeah, yeah. I think that that's such a good point to bring up. I follow this. She's not a yoga teacher, but she does spinal energetics. And she used this one phrase one time, mainly talking about anxiety, but I think you could apply it to really all emotions, that the anxiety or the burnout or the stress isn't the problem. It's actually your body's solution to the problem. Like, it's actually trying to take care of you. So I think that that's a way to even reframe that relationship that you're talking about, to not looking at it as like something to be upset with, but that it's just feedback, that it's just information of how we can kind of shift our behaviors or our life to be in more support, is the first thing that all of what you were just saying made me think of. And then the second, I just recently had a corporate yoga teaching opportunity where I went into a convention here in Las Vegas, which actually happens a lot. And the company was a cyber company that basically protects people's really secure data, sensitive data, from being hacked or breached from hackers. And so these people are under an immense amount of stress and have very sedentary jobs, sitting at their desks, staring at screens all day. And I was guiding them through some just really simple mindfulness practices, and found it, again, it was just such a reminder for somebody like us and you and all of our listeners, who this is our life, this is our work, and we love and obsess and nerd out, like you were saying, like, get obsessed and really dive in. We think about it and talk about it all the time, but there's so many people who don't have an exposure, who have no idea about some of these beautiful practices that we can use to manage and medicate our own stress. And specifically, I love your work of like becoming more aware of that relationship between your nervous system regulation in relation to your work, and how that shows up between your ideas of money. So I know you have so much to talk about in regards to that. Can you tell us more about that connection, how you see that showing up with the people that you serve, and how it might be affecting some of the listeners?
Yeah, so the thing about stress and the thing about burnout is, like you were just saying, anxiety, for instance, it's an emotion, you know. And the first invitation that we learn in the practice of Yoga Nidra and the ancient practices, it invites you to accept emotions exactly as they are. And this was brand new information for me. Like, so anxiety is not bad, anger is not bad, envy is not bad. I can be envious of someone and not label that. There are no bad emotions. Hello, inside out. Hello, sadness. So it was a true assignment for us to watch Inside Out and just really connect with the emotions. So, stress is just like that. And the idea is you get addicted to your emotions. And the problem with stress is that you get addicted to stress as well. So the idea is that if you can get addicted to emotions, and if you get the tendency to get addicted to stress as well, then imagine how much power you have if you can choose what you get addicted to. It's completely transformative. So it's also very contagious. So, like I said, in my community of women and in my family and my upbringing, my mom was very stressed out in her upbringing as well. So, watching her and observing the way she was acting as a child, I'm mirroring all her emotions. And then we all grew up in an environment where you're in fight or flight, or you're in survival mode, or you're constantly angry, for instance. And that became my foundational feeling, the way I feel initially, which is becoming stressed out. I am very much addicted to stress. So when I step into the corporate world, when I step into university, when I step into an educational system, even stepping into the realm of yoga teaching, yoga studio, running my yoga studio, running retreats, my relationship to stress is not traditional anymore. I'm looking for a way to stay up there, to stay super activated because I'm addicted to it. So that's one note. The second thing is it's prestigious now to say that you're busy. So that has like that's not just restricted to womanhood, but in general, when you're busy, it's super prestigious, which makes the relationship with burnout super toxic. Because who like I left my corporate job 3 months ago, and in my therapy session, I was talking to her. I'm like, I'm beginning to experience myself without a little bit of this burnout, and I don't know who am I if I'm not super flooded with those stress hormones, with cortisol. So that's the problem. The third thing when it comes to womanhood and money, which is huge, like the correlation is huge, is that as women, our entire hormonal structure is highly influenced by this. Once we are hooked in this act of running and in this stress response, we have the tendency to shut down everything else in our life. And there's so many reasons behind that, but I just wanted to bring this onto the table that we are wired differently than men when it comes down to this. Yet we live in a world that is highly dominant by the nature of the capitalist structure, by the nature of how everything is being developed. It's a very tough world, and we're being asked to abandon, parts of our bodies that are here for a reason.
Wow, so many mic drop moments. It made me think of a quote by Brene Brown.
Oh, I love Brené Brown.
I do too. Maybe you're familiar with this quote, but she's like, I no longer wear my busyness as a badge of honor. Something to that effect, that it is so true that we gain a lot of our self-worth off of how much we accomplish. And I am so guilty of this, that I feel better about myself the more I check off the list. So I think that I resonate with what you're saying, and I'm sure listeners do too, of feeling like addicted to all of that, and not knowing who you are without that, all of the stuff on your plate. Can you talk, I mean, I know you said it's a big topic, but the connection between money and the nervous system, and when your nervous system is more depleted or operating on that place of burnout, how that shows up in the finances, and which one do you fix first?
So this is becoming a really widely researched topic very, very recently, and it's just huge. So first of all, to answer this, we need to take a step back and look through the eyes of the work of someone like Kimberly Johnson with a real big feminine approach in her book Call of the Wild to the woman's nervous system. So through her work, you actually get introduced to how different our bodies are wired as women. And the first thing she talks about in relationship to money and the nervous system is the social nervous system. So the social nervous system is huge for women, and it's part of our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest. And the social nervous system is usually in the eyes, it's in our heads, and it's in our necks. And it is the way that we observe our environment to feel safe. And this is essential for women because Safety for women has a lot to do with being able to feel like they belong, because we also have more estrogen in our bodies, and it's essential for us to feel connected. And when you learn that, you also learn the role of money when it comes into your nervous system and how you process it. Because this is exactly the first part. So let's say you come from a family where there was not enough money, and that's how you are wired. As soon as you step into the community, as soon as you step into society, you start to mirror what you were brought up from, or the origins of your family. Like, let's say you came from a place where your family were really poor. You will want to maintain this poor picture because that's how you were brought up, and you will search for it outside, which is our first correlation with money, because you want to look outside and make sure that the outside world also reflects your inside world or your family. So you want to maintain that. If you come to earn more than they did, this will register as a threat in your nervous system, and you will not feel completely okay with it. Your body will process it as danger, and you will even try to avoid it because it doesn't feel safe for you. It's not familiar for you, and the nervous system loves familiarity. Familiarity is where we were brought up. So the second layer, as like Kimberly Johnson would explain it, is also that we have the tendency to equate ourselves and our work with our identity. So if you're, like, let's say you're a yoga teacher, or you're working in a corporate job, or whatever form of like a job you do for income, you tend to equate yourself with this kind of job. So if something is wrong in the job, if something is wrong in your business, you start to assume that something is wrong with you, which registers as a threat in your system, which also interrupts your relationship with money as well, because it is no longer that, oh, something is wrong because I'm not setting boundaries with my clients in the yoga bookings, the bookings at the yoga studio, for instance. Something is wrong with me. Something is wrong with me, not something is wrong with the system I'm implementing at the studio or the system I'm implementing with my clients. Something is wrong with me. I am not worthy of this work, for instance. And then there starts a shame cycle. And when you move into that, like, you step from the social nervous system and you start to dive into a deeper layer, or the second layer, you start to dive into our sympathetic nervous system response, where there are two branches to it. Either you run to fix and look for change, you feel motivated, you feel empowered, and that's when you feel safe in your body. So you want to move positively, do something, you feel empowered or powerful. And that's a fight response. And then there's the flight response, where you get this credit card message and you look the other way and you completely avoid it. Avoidance is a complete flight response. And all of us women have developed this, because money is emotions. Money is emotions. And we develop story around what we're doing, what we're spending, how we're making this money, and our worth and value. So we create all of this. And then we flight and we lose our impact. Like, as soon as you flight, you don't look at your numbers. Like, I spent the first 2 years running a yoga studio, and I had a corporate job. At my corporate job, I was fluent with numbers. I was learning all the data, how to do the functions, how to read, proper Excel things. But when it came down to the numbers at the studio, I just couldn't bring myself to it. I got a partner and I asked him to handle this part because it was too much for my nervous system to process. I wasn't looking at the data like they're just data, they're numbers. And if there's something wrong, then we need to think of a solution in the system. I was looking at it as the data represents me, and there's so much shame around what if I mess up? What if I didn't work hard enough, which is my foundation story. Grind, grind, grind. So and that's how the nervous system is wired. And then when you look at it, if we are in the stress response, flooded with stress hormones, constantly worried, constantly overthinking, burnout, we're also going to take this into our relationship with money. And we're also going to start, money wants a regulated nervous system. It wants you to feel like you know what you're doing, you know what you want, what you don't want. We take all of the stress into money. And that's why I've known so many women in the corporate field and even in the entrepreneurship field, where they made so much money. It had nothing to do with how much they made, but they never really knew what to do with it because they were so busy making it. Their health was suffering. Their nervous system was an absolute mess as well. Their whole hormonal structure was a mess, and it creates a catastrophe, and that speaks for so many women.
Wow, that was incredible. I cannot wait to go back and listen to that. I feel like I just learned so much. So thank you for sharing that. That was so fascinating. I love what you said about the familiarity, because that kind of helps us, not blame ourselves so much that we are literally wired to stay familiar, even if that familiarity is self harming. On the flip side, after that familiarity, the identity part, that is so real of like, you're like, I don't want to change because I'm comfortable with this change. I'm familiar with this change. Even if it's producing the same result that I'm stuck in, at least I know what it is, because it's more of the we'd rather have the comfort of what's known rather than the discomfort of the unknown. And that part about identity is so true, which it's interesting that you had the circumstance to examine, like when you're looking at data for a different company, how you don't tether your worth to it, but when it's yours, that it can be so tricky to not enmesh yourself in your work. And I love the even just tip of getting somebody else to look at it. That's probably a really amazing thing that others can do, of like, if you notice your nervous system wanting to do this, of getting wrapped up in it, like, can you have an outside person so that you give your nervous system a little break? Which brings me to, I guess, the next question is, what are things that yoga teachers can do to support their nervous system to kind of get out of this cycle of staying in the familiar or wrapping up their identities and producing results that they don't want anymore?
I think specifically for yoga teachers, because I've witnessed this pattern in running the yoga studio and speaking with so many teachers. So, to give you some context about the industry here in Egypt, because it's super interesting, the yoga industry is starting to grow, and we're starting to witness that increased demand, right? But it's still in a place where it's, there's a lot of growth that it has to take, and we're still educating the market, and there's still so much room to expand. And if you have something different to offer, then there's so much language to speak. But the problem with teachers is that they tend to feel super lonely in the industry, because across the world it's very hard to make a living just from teaching studio classes specifically, so let alone in a developing country like Egypt, where the economic situation is super difficult and challenging. But the bigger issue that I see happening with yoga teachers is that they tend to feel like they're alone, and this is where the masculine side, the competitive side of, the capitalist structure, brings us back to it again, really puts the yoga teacher's mindset in, because they assume that if their classes are not getting as much traffic as they would hope to, if they are not generating the amount of money that they would actually hope to, they assume that they're alone. And that's the first nervous system threat response, that they assume that they're alone. And as soon as we do this, that's exactly the work of the social nervous system, is that you don't want to be alone. Even as a yoga teacher, you want to blend with the community. So I feel like the first invitation would be, find yourself a community. That's what I did. Like, I reached out to guides and teachers in my industry who I've never met in real life before. We met through Instagram, and then we connected together, and they've become my absolute support group. Now, if I have any dark days, which is very common when you're creating, or you're a business owner, or you're a yoga teacher in this industry, generally you'll have your ups and downs. So when you have a community, your social nervous system feels confirmed that you're not crazy. And even if you want to charge, you now know the average. Like, you go and you ask them, guys, I'm thinking of doing this. What do you think? How do we create this? And then together you guys also work to set standards. And that's what we've worked on in the industry, setting standards in the industry, setting boundaries. It took us a while to say, we don't do free yoga for no cause. That's not how we're going to operate. So let's say a corporate a company reaches out to me and asks me for a number that I think is absolutely below our minimum, I also got back to this community and asked them, girls, how should we set the range for this? Sometimes it works. Like, sometimes we find them something. Sometimes other teachers, they are super high earners and they set the bar for high numbers. And I love those teachers, because they prove to you that you go, girl. It took me some time to understand this, but they really do raise the bar. So, like, if a teacher sets high number, and then the same company reaches out to someone else and sets a middle number, she raised the bar for that other teacher. So Thank you, even if you didn't get the job. Yeah. And so, yeah, so step one is get yourself a community. Step number two, actually, which I think should be step one, is what the work of Barry Tester does in her course, The Art of Money, and her book. Also, a phenomenal somatic and money work that changed my life completely. Is that she always invites you to do what is known as a body check in. And a body check in is that it is you come into your body whenever there's a money interaction, you sit back, you notice your breath in relationship to your body, and then you notice what this money conversation is doing to you. Be it charging clients a certain number, be it that you are receiving money from a certain client, or that you're receiving an offer, or that a corporate is asking you to have an offer. So, do the body check ins, know your body. It took me, like, when I did this course, it took me like 3 to 4 months to really know how my body responds in certain money situations, certain money decisions. There are things I thought I'm good at, it turned out I'm not that good at. There are things I thought I sucked at, it turned out I'm really good at. So body check-ins are essential because like, the number one thing is awareness. Where are you? And the second thing is, like I said, the community part is essential. Find your community, find your voice in the teacher community, work together, collaborate together, not compete. I'm so against competition in this industry, like healthy competition, but work together, take each other's feedback, raise the bar for one another. That's very healthy. I just feel get support, because as yoga teachers there's a lot of giving, and that's where burnout comes. You're giving hourly rates. The hourly rates, the healing industry is super well known for this. Even if you're not just a yoga teacher, if you're a therapist, if you're an astrologer, if you work in a field where you're getting paid, like per hour, you are so much likely to burn out. So finding a community and get also support, work with financial therapists, get yourself support. There are amazing people who work with service providers just to help them create a sustainable level of income, of yoga, acupuncture, of whatever field that is service oriented.
Yeah, I feel the same. And this is really the first year, having been a yoga teacher for 12 years, but really only the last 4 years since shutdown. I've gone more all in or full time into yoga teaching. And in that decision, obviously, it puts more pressure on yoga teaching to bring in a certain amount of income if this is only, my only place where I'm receiving money. So it's changed the relationship a lot. Getting support is so crucial. And I wish I would have done it 4 years ago, at least, if not 12 years ago, because like you were saying, your mind, when you approach or when you trip, I guess, over some of those inevitable obstacles, your because your nervous system is receiving those threats. I'm trying to use some of the language and the words that you're saying. You do feel crazy. And it's worse when you feel alone and your self story, like mine, just becomes so self critical, so self negative, so judgmental, and it just perpetuates more problems. But it's so important to have a place to go where you can talk it out, whether you're saying your successes, whether you're sharing your struggles, and just venting to people who will understand, who are trying to do the same thing that you're doing. Because while it's nice to have like a soundboard of your partner or your parents or your dog, you can kind of make it work with whomever. But until you have somebody who's in the arena that you want to be playing in and who's faced it, who can give you real personalized help on what you're facing, that makes all the difference. And I love what you said too about the expanders, the people who are casually or nonchalantly saying the things that are like, you haven't even stretched your imagination to imagine what they're talking about. They're saying it's so helpful for you and your nervous system to be like, wow, I didn't even think that that was possible. And now that they've shown me that it's possible, I'm starting to stretch and believe that maybe it's possible for me too, because that's how we continue to grow. It's like being in the space and being in the room with people who are doing above and beyond what you even thought, and that you can now ask for that same rate and price that somebody else did. And that's a really great way to like cut through that comparison trap that you mentioned, of instead of being like, oh, they got the job, it's like, well, yeah, they got the job, but maybe they raised the bar on the income of what I can ask for too. So I love that really tangible piece of advice that you offered there. There is so much that you've given us. And I know you really spent a lot of time in meditation in preparing. Is there anything else that you kind of wanted to share as far as like money or women that's coming to the surface for you?
For women who are working in this field, in the yoga industry or in the healing industry in general, is to really find their community. Because when you ask for help, when you go to a community of teachers and you just say, hey, where did you do this course? Or I'm really struggling to make a living out of this situation, or this season is super difficult, and this person just offers a hand, everything starts to change from there, and all the shame that you carry as women really, completely lifts off. And yeah, I think that's absolutely a game changer when it comes to feeling safe. And that's the only way for you to make this part sustainable. I mean, if you really want to make this sustainable, how many teachers do we know who just felt super fed up from doing this, that they stopped developing themselves and they just gave up altogether? And they're not alone as well. So just talk to someone, and you'll be surprised when you feel like you're not alone. That just takes everything away. Like, okay, so I'm not crazy. We're all having the same doubts, but we're still doing it.
It's seriously so important for me. Like burnout appears, I'm trying to think of like the symptoms of what it looks like, and those burnout, how it does make you want to give up. And when you're talking about sustainability, some of the signals burnout, what burnout looks for me in my body is I start to get really agitated and irritated, and I start to resent yoga. Like I start to resent what I love, and my mental story will get very like, I guess it's the ego being like, things shouldn't be this way, or this person needs to step up in these ways. And I'll just start to get really judgy of both myself and other people, and short and snappy and reactive. That's kind of the first thing that I notice, is that I just feel my joy starting to be clouded and covered up by just the blame that I feel like I'm putting on the situation or other people, to explain why why I don't need to make the changes. So I see that, and then that was kind of the catalyst for me being like, okay, either I can keep doing what I'm doing, which is obviously irritating and agitating to my nervous system, or I could make some changes, which inevitably, in doing something different, you have to accept the reality of doing something uncertain, which feels a little stressful on the nervous system because it's the unknown. But in doing the unknown, then I open myself up to different actions and different outcomes. To have the burnout, and then to be like, okay, either like, what am I going to do about this burnout? And that is really what led me to, I guess, investing into getting into the right spaces and getting the support, because that was my like solution to the burnout. And that is such a great way to kind of get out of it, is become a student again. For me, that's like one of the quickest fixes, is to stop putting the pressure on myself to be the creator or be the teacher, but to be inspired again by somebody else, what they're teaching, what they're doing, what they're achieving. That is one of the fastest ways to continue to grow, because really I think burnout too is like hitting a plateau on your skills. Like you stop growing a little bit. So then you stop being interested. And when you're, uninterested, then you get a little bit bored. And then that boredom is the devil's playground. It opens you up to all sorts of other issues. But that would be another piece of advice in terms of like getting the support, is when you feel that burnout, is there a way that you can reignite that spark through learning again, or seeking other like coaching or mentorship, or things like that? So just wanted to throw that little piece of advice in.
So actually, there are stages of burnout. So first of all, where are you in your burnout? Because there are stages, there are signs, and then there is the body and all the illnesses that show up at the illnesses are the later stages. It's like, hey, the body saying, telling you, hey, I tried to warn you, you weren't listening, so now I need to stop you. So that is like that kind of like, for instance, in my last few days in my corporate job, my body was, I was doing all the nidras. It was helping me so much in the stressful situations at work. It helped me a lot to gain a sense of what I want, what I don't want, which is what the Nidra practice does, is that you start to become aware, like what is working out and what is not. But as soon as I started to push through a difficult situation and a difficult, stressful time, and then I started to stay stuck in that stressful time for whatever, like I created this narrative where I am stuck in it. Then I got this burnout, and then it started to show in the form of like my body was giving me the signals. I was constantly having those, my left eye was twitching. It kept twitching for like nonstop for 6 complete months, and I wasn't stopping. It was crazy, and I was aware, like I'm doing the work, my eyes are twitching, am I failing myself? It felt really controversial, like I'm reading all this, I know what's happening, but still, like I had to take certain measurements. So knowing that, understanding, okay, something is off, that's the first step, because like it's not that you're wondering, you're taking the medications and you're not knowing what the cause is. No, so I think that's the number one step. Is the second thing is, I think, it's so important. Like I said in the beginning, stress is not bad for you. It's the relationship that you have with stress. So if we create equal rest responses for every stress response we get, we will be in balance. We will be in harmony. The problem is that we don't know how to stop. And this is where money work comes in. The reason you don't know when to stop has a lot to do with your relationship to money again. How you are wired from a child. It has nothing to do with the amount of money you're making. It has a lot to do with the story and the narrative around what you should be doing and how to feel secure and how you need to stay. Some people, I grew up with the belief system that just being overworked means that you're making money, even though that you can make very little money working this much, and you can make so much more money doing something else. For instance, that narrative didn't even register in my system. So awareness is the number one step. Like, notice the signals, do the body check-ins, come back to your body, do the nidras. Nidras really help you soften and listen. That's the number one step. And then you can slowly start to notice. After noticing, you can really start to develop that awareness. And then you really need to do the money work. So many yoga teachers leave this behind. We create this narrative that money is bad, all those masculine structures around money. We don't want to do this. You need to create a new realm where money is good. How else are you going to survive this business? How else are you going to, like, for the yoga studio, how am I going to pay yoga teachers if I keep looking the other way every time an opportunity comes? How will the industry continue to thrive if I'm not investing in it as an owner? If I'm not having the money, how am I going to fuel myself? How am I going to fuel them? So that narrative is so important. You need to look at your numbers, get the support, you know and really look at, understand the narrative. Are you more into the fight response, where you're like crazy trying to always action things, or you kind of avoid looking at numbers? Get to know yourself, get to know your workings, but always develop that awareness. Look at your numbers, create a business model, get support, get whatever form of support. But if you take money out of the table, you're destined for burnout altogether. It's how we choose to do it. Either that we're going to hate it and we're going to burn out of hunger because we're overworking so many studio hours, for instance, hourly rates, or we're going to get creative with it.
Wow, beautiful. And yes, yes, yes to all of the money mindset work that yoga teachers need to do. Something that's helped me is to think of money as a meditation as well, and to think about how money brings about opportunity, and to think about how when you have more money, that the world is a better place because of, and what money allows you to be able to do. So thinking of it more as money is the vehicle for me to expand or broaden this reach that I already have. That helped me, instead of just thinking like that it's about making some sort of money or just profit, but how that profit helps you continue to really serve people through yoga. Is there any other like specific stuff in terms of doing the money work that you feel like you didn't mention? Or how can yoga teachers start to do money work?
Yoga teachers who are listening to this will probably be super triggered by this, because the word money and yoga, when they come together, it creates a little bit of friction. But that's why I believe it's essential, because the statistics show and research shows that everyone in the healing industry, regardless, not just yoga, even if you're a therapist, an hourly rate pay is super hard on the nervous system, because your income is related to the number of hours that you take in, and that registers as a threat when you still don't know how to speak the language of sustainability and business models, and making it more of a feminine approach. Like, how can I design my work in a way that's aligned with my body, my needs? Like, for instance, I'm an introvert. Do I need to go out and, shift my business model to socializing so that I can make a living, fill in my classes, make them 200 a class? That will not work if I'm an introvert. Does this mean I suck as a teacher? No, it's just we need to operate differently. So being kind, getting that form of community and support, and also resource your body. And you just need to look at, get hire a financial therapist, look at the numbers. But if we leave numbers out of the equation, we're always going to be, in a cloud. Barry Tester always says this beautiful word and description around describing this as the sacred vessel, the bridge between heavens and earth, because you're really looking at the numbers and seeing how you can make this work that's a dream, which is changing people's lives through yoga, real by looking at numbers, making it happen.
Wow. Thank you so much, Gihan, for being here. Can you tell all the listeners about what you have coming up, how they can get plugged into you and your work in case they're really resonating with what you're saying?
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed this so much. You can continue to work with me through assigning to my one-to-one customized Yoga Nidra practices. We basically have a discussion around what form of money story you're carrying, or what form of troubles that you're carrying in terms of your burnout, and how to come back from it through our Yoga Nidra practices. That's one thing. The second thing is, you can sign up to my retreats in Sinai, here in Egypt. Sinai is absolutely beautiful. The Red Sea is magical. So come and join one of our women retreats, and you will really come back changed. And yeah, you should visit Egypt sometime. You will fall in love with it.
Yeah, I think we might. My business partner, we have a retreat company that we call Retraka Retreats. I'm like, we need to hook up and see if there's some sort of collaboration there, because I would love to come to Egypt. Well, to everybody listening, thank you so much for listening to this episode and every episode that is released to you every Wednesday. If you loved it, please do us a favor and take a screenshot, plop it up onto your stories, tag both of us. My handle is at Master Your Yoga Teaching. And Gihan, what is yours?
Gihan_Saiid.
Nice. Tag both of us to let us know that you listened to it. If you have other yoga teacher friends, go ahead and send it their way so that we can keep growing this community of yoga teachers who are interested in continuing to develop. Thanks so much, Gihan.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And to everybody else, see you next Wednesday. Namaste blessed. Thanks for listening. If this is your first time, peruse our feed to see if there's something else that will serve you. We're so grateful that you're here and invite you to join our inner circle by subscribing to our newsletter. If this episode resonated with you, help us spread the word by sending it to a friend who needs to hear this message. Likes, follows, sends, shares, and reviews help us to continue delivering high-quality content to you for free each and every week. Don't forget to tag at Master Your Yoga Teaching so we can reshare. I am a certified yogi. However, this podcast is intended for information and entertainment only. If you are interested in mentorship or coaching with me, check out the website linked in the show notes to get more information. This content and other content produced by CLW Studios and affiliated partners is not therapy, and nothing in this content indicates a therapeutic relationship. Any opinions of guests on the podcast are their own and do not represent the opinions of Mackenzie or CLW Studios. Learn more about Mackenzie, her guests, and CLW Studios by following the links in the show notes. Keep shining, and we will see you next Wednesday for another dose of Master Your Yoga Teaching. Namaste blessed.